everyone, I'm Century Uayan and I'm your reporter in the topic Europe in the late 19th century. For the information of everyone, this is the continuation of the report of Miss Mary Escrito regarding the late 1900s in Europe also. This report of mine is consists of 9 subtopics, but before that, I would like to state first the purpose of this report. This report aims to explain how the Western influence prompted other nations to move toward industrialization, modernization, and Western-style constitutional government. In this report, I will be going to discuss to you about some information of the Cold War, creating social security, milestone of the first European integration, the memory of Shoah, the end of the boom, and the democratization in Western Europe, communism under pressure, milestone of the second European integration, and last but not the least is the remapping of Europe. Before I begin with my discussion, let me share to you a quote written by Stephen Kern regarding the late 19th century. According to him, the late 19th century broke down the old barriers of distance as fast steamships, the railroad, and the telegraph helped to link rural Europe to its capital cities and Europe to the world. I assume that every one of us already know about the important events that happened during the 19th century because I believe that we've already discussed about such on our previous major subjects in history. As a review, 19th century is an age of industrial revolution as well as political revolution. So, the late 19th century is still considered as a revolutionary period as well as a time of great transformation since this is the this is the time wherein they witnessed a great social, economic, political, scientific, as well as industrial changes than the previous eras that happened in history. Moreover, it is also a time of great social change. So now, let's begin on our first topic, which is the Cold War. So this is the map of the Cold War of Europe. Between 1945 and 1949, a gulf opened between former Allied powers in every international issue with the USA, Great Britain, and France on the other side, while on the other side naman is the Soviet Union. Because during the time, there was an ideological differences between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. It is by the sense that Western Europe were of liberal democracy while the Eastern Europe were of communism. So there was a great possibility that there would be a new world war. Moreover, the Western Europe also felt deep mistrust with the Soviet Union, especially during their first testing of their atomic bomb in 1949. With that, the Europe became a divided continent, which makes a difficult situation, especially to the different countries of Europe, especially those who prefer to be a who prefer to be in a neutral state. As what you have saw in the map, the blue were of the capitalist or democracy, while the red were of the communist, while the yellow were of the neutral. So the yellow, they they have experienced a more complex situation since they have created an independence support system such as the non-alliance movement in 1961. Isa pa na ay mga differences mga makita between Western and Eastern Bloc because para sa kung giingon ganina nga ang Western were of a democratic regime and the Eastern Bloc were of communism. However, not all who were on the communist government followed the order. Then didto pud sa pikas nga bahin Western Europe, they accepted non-communist regime. So simply say they were just contradicting each other.
Let's proceed to creating social security. Around 1950s and 1960s, there was an improvement of living conditions of most people across Europe. Economic growth and the introduction of welfare brought better housing, education, healthcare, and social services among people. Housing. Housing was the top priority of most people across Europe. It is due to the reason that there was a rapidly growing population and urbanization which made the situations critical, which means the government and the urban planners need to act regarding this. So, in response, the the housing investors receive heavy investments, especially in electricity, pipe gas, and many many to mentions, and most of the people have already set a high standard of living. Next is healthcare. For the first time in history, the government introduced a concept of welfare, introducing access to healthcare for all, and it gives rise to the development and improvement of the sector across Europe. In addition to that, the maintenance of national medical and welfare systems enlightens the increasing public funding. Next is consumerism. Around 1950s and 1960s, the Western and Eastern European economies grew in a rapid rate despite their developmental differences. And in addition to that, the agricultural community gave way to the industrialized society. And by 1960s, people already have the purchasing power, dividing more than just a part of living. There was also an existence of purchasing a it there was also a mass purchasing stimulated by industrialized mass production, which is encouraged by trade regulation. So, because of trade regulation, Europeans can now access foreign trades, foreign goods and services. There are these types of consumerism. Then next is consumerism on electrical appliances. Appliances like refrigerators, washing machine, televisions, telephones, this kind of appliances seek note to the arrival of modernity, which means kung naa kay mga ingana nga gamit, then you are stable, you are more living better. Ingana. Next is the consumerism of house designs. During this period, there was already an existence of chemical industry that gives an introduction to the new forms of enhanced plastics. Then it is also durable, fashionable, and in low prices, which were both from Western and Eastern Europe, since these two were of competing economies. Next is consumerism in baby boom. Because of economic growth, there was a full employment provided by the government as a family support. Dayon kanang because of that, due to that, there was an impressive baby boom, especially in Western Europe and a lesser degree to the Eastern Europe. And it's not just a kanang growing population, but it also made an increase to younger generations. Then even if there is a growing population, they don't need to work to support their families. They would either left home and work by themselves, or they would go to universities and other institutions to enable to learn something. Next is consumerism on fashion. Europeans, especially young Europeans, have, since there was an economic boom, it means that they need to spend less on basic necessities and indulge more on purchasing related to fashion, just like dresses, since it becomes since it became an important form of self-expression and freedom. Next is the consumerism on food and packaging. Um, as the years goes by, the people became more innovative and productive, which became the reason nga kanang gusto na nila og unique og mas creative nga pagkahimo sa isa ka kanang product, as more importantly sa food, o kung giunsa na siya pag putos, may it be soft drinks, canned goods, and other strategies para nga mas dali mahalin ang isa ka produkto, because it's not just about taste sa isa ka pagkaon, but it's also about sa kanang kung unsa siya sa gawas, just like kung eye-catching ba ang kanang pagkaputos niya, ingana. Next is education. There was an changes that happened in Europe. Enormous changes happened in the educational system of Europe because of the economic boom. During that period, there was a better access of education for more children and young people. Then, education was not just a privilege for the minority, it becomes a privilege for all. And however, both the Western and the Eastern Europe has a different educational reform, since the Eastern Europe is advocating a classless educational system, while the Western Europe was advocating for unequal opportunities for all the citizens. Then next is mobility. Because of the economic prosperity in Europe during that period, there was a full employment. Everyone had given a chance to work. However, naagay time nga kapuyon gyud ang isa ka tawo, then we need leisure time. So, we need to travel to many places, and in able to travel, we need cars and different transportation para sa mga lugar nga atong adtuan. So, during this period, people wants a people wanted a private car ownership, wherein they can travel easier wherever they go.
Moving on to the milestones of the first European integration, the Soviet Union's control in Eastern Europe and its standoff with the United States of America gave the world two new terms. First was the Iron Curtain, and second was the Cold War. With the American support, the condition of the closer cooperation of the Western Europe grew. To better understand about this, I will discuss to you related about in able to further understand about this, let's discuss on between two blocks. In Western Europe, the hope of the United Europe grew in popularity as it became increasingly good with the two superpowers, and slowly the continent became the third force, which paved its way to the intensified cross-border cooperation. Next is the Congress of Europe. Because of the war, there were rallies and cries hoping that there would be there would be no more war again. During the time also, there were supporters of the United Europe to meet in 1948 in the Netherlands. And this is a Congress which desired to secure peaceful future for their closer European cooperation, and it was no longer defined in just a small circle of intellectuals. And this Congress was organized by the pro-European activists which discussed regarding economic, political, and cultural cooperation. And one of its greatest achievements was the cooperation of the Council of Europe to have a future continent with wide organization for the collaboration on cultural and human rights. Next is the European Coal and Steel Community. Regarding to that, the French minister in the person of Robert Schuman suggested that the European nation should share powers in able to create a coal and steel production in able to ensure a peace and prosperity to reconcile France and Germany. So because of that, there were six countries who agreed and created the European Coal and Steel Community. And these countries are the Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and Netherlands. Next is the failure of the European Defense Community. During that time, there was a European army who was assigned to defend the emerging European community. And it is because of the Soviet threat. And that time, there was a particular member state who tolerate having West Germany to serve multinational capacity. So, after the war, nagka kuan sila na ay misunderstanding nga nahitabo between the West Germany and the France. That's why the France refused to ratify treaty kay ang France and Germany kay naana sila treaty to share military sovereignty. So this particular situation is a failure and a serious setback in terms of the European integration. So the NATO then become one military umbrella under the protection of European integration. Next is the Rome Treaties. The European Economic Community came into being in 1957 when they signed the Rome Treaties. There were 6 countries nga ni-signed. Mao gihapon to ang Belgium, France, West Germany, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Italy. Dayon, they have decided to create an ever closer union, and they created the common market based on 4 freedoms, namely the first, mao na siya ang free movement of person, second is the free movement of goods, third is the free movement of services, and the last one is the free movement of capital. Then they also established the European Atomic Energy Community, enabled to have a peaceful development of nuclear energy. Dayon, in addition to that, they also created a new European legal system which prioritized the national law of the member state. Next is the architects of the European integration. Because of their experience in war, they have turned the idea of having a European unity into reality. The European politicians became their pioneers, kanang then they were the kanang they have established the unity and peace they founded in the values of human rights, democracy, the rule of law, and the economic development. They also created an original institution based on the principles of separation of power and the sharing of national sovereignty. Next is the Common Agricultural Policy. During 1962, there was a common system that introduced which offered a financial system having a streamlining efforts across all 6 countries. Then its result were efficient and guaranteed returns from the farmers because it is a complex and very expensive system which protected the farmers from the world market. And kani siya nga common agricultural policy, however, it was not free from those who were criticism inside nor outside the community. Next is the Illicit Treaty. The entry hostility between Germany and France ended with Franco-Germany reconciliation. And during that time, the Illicit Treaty was also signed, putting both countries on the part of a closer cooperation. Dayon, meetings between both two countries have begun at all levels, and youth exchange programs were organized by the Franco-Germany office. Dayon, kani siya, kaning closer ties between Germany and France became a vital step for a good European integration. Next is the first enlargement. In the year 1973, the 6 members of the original EC be- became 9 when there were 3 countries nga ni joined. Ang 3 countries mo ang Great Britain, Denmark, and Ireland. Dayon ang Norway also accounted. They voted again in membership, referendum, health, and dayon they proceed on the another year. Dayon, because of that, the European community is now widely described as a largest trading area in the world, but it increasingly diverse mix of cultures, languages, and traditions. Let's proceed to the memory of the Shoah. So, what is Shoah? According to Der Proel 2019, Shoah serves as a global icon for a global human rights system and a universally held moral standard. And according to the Journal of European Studies nga sa in Eastern perspective daw that the Shoah is the process of globalizing shown, and it is often considered to be a Western preoccupation and just another mechanism with, with which to further Western cultural domination. Then, on Central Europe's perspective, Showa is it is more focused on the process of historical impact of communism and on identity-based policies to strengthen social cohesion in these times of rapid change and transformation. Next is the end of the boom. By the way, if you are wondering why my picture is included there, well, I think it's just a part of being creative since anyway, end of the boom. So the end of the boom was happened in the year 1970s when the new social movements challenged the political order. So this is the picture of Europe. In the 1970s, Europe's post-war boom comes to an end and new social movements challenge political order. Then the former communist countries started a process of joining the European Union. That time, nations agreed to abandon they agreed to abandon more of their powers and achieve supernatural efficiency. Then, despite of the economic and social challenges, the European community continued to build up the common market, and there were also new state members such as the Greece, Portugal, and Spain. By 1973, the oil cost rocketed by 70% as Arab producer countries belonging to the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries cartel quadrupled their prices. And it resulted to a global energy crisis which ended the Europe's boom. This energy crisis directly affected the people's everyday lives. So the European government have different campaigns that were organized, and one of those was the Sunday driving bans in able to save fuel, because it is also emphasized there that the Western economies were dependent on energy imports. Let's move on to the democratization in Western Europe. So this is the map of the Western Europe. In the late 1960s, a new generation wanted change because they were tired of the old ways, and they demanded more individual rights and opportunities to participate in politics. And between 1974 to 1975, the Greece, Spain, and Portugal's ruling dictatorship collapsed because they had experienced political instability, economic crisis, and painful historical legacies on their paths to democracy. While on 1970s, women shone a spotlight on continuing inequal, inequalities between the sexes, because during that time, feminism emerged as an active force that hoped to end patriarchal domination and create truly equal societies. Number 7 is communism under pressure. By the end of 1980s, there were food shortages, constant surveillance, censorship, restrictions, and even prohibitions on travel outside the communist bloc. And it led to the fall of communism in 1989. Number 8 is the milestones of the Second European integration. By 1979, the first direct elections to the European Parliament happened, and, and there was also the creation of single market. By the way, single market is the creation of unified economic area where people, money, goods, and services can move freely. And in addition, the European single market had been one of the European community's main goal from its foundation. Last is the remapping of Europe. By 1989, transformation of the map of Europe with new nations emerging and old borders redrawn. In addition, the German already reunites. They reunited on 1990 under the international supervision. This is the end of my report. Thank you so much for listening and watching this video, and I hope that you learned something from my report. Thank you so much. Keep safe and God bless us all.